Iran should be the hegemon, the regional hegemon, much the way that China is in their region. Like, in the Middle East would be a safer place if Iran was just the big boy in charge, rather than us constantly waging these proxy wars against them via like Iraq or like trying to hold in territory through Afghanistan or with Israel, of course. You know, I don't think Iran is good, but I think the consequences of us constantly trying to fuck them over are worse. Vaush, strongest supporter for the Ayatollah. Yeah, I'm an unironic advocate for multipolarism in the specific instance. Shame they're crazy. Actually, the Iranian government is relatively realistic in how it handles its foreign policy goals. I mean, they fund a bunch of local terrorist groups because they're trying to like wage a proxy war in the region against our interests and our control, you know? I feel like, I mean, functionally, the only difference between what they're doing and what we've done is that we do it like officially with our flag stamped on it, and they do it covertly through like terrorist channels. But ultimately, like, we are both fighting for control of the region through proxies. Apparently, Iran has enriched their nuclear increased their nuclear enrichment rate. Yeah, I mean, they will get those nukes eventually. Why choose them over Saudi Arabia? Because nobody likes Saudi Arabia. Like, they're just oil petrostates in the region. Like, there's no actual cultural control there, I don't think, apart from what they buy. Saudi Arabia could not maintain. Look, Iran has been like a Giga Chad holding down like 15 proxy terrorist battles against the West for years now. Saudi Arabia did a sanctioned genocide in Yemen, and what did they do? They made the Houthis 10 times as strong. Like, Saudi Arabia can't do shit. They're a fat, bloated, totalitarian oligarchy. That, like, Saudi Arabia isn't corrupt. It is corruption. There's nothing like there's nothing there. It's a dead country, and it's 90% dead sand too. Iran is a real country with real cultural and economic power that isn't entirely fucking fueled by like the most like striated resource extraction market possible, you know. To be fair, Iran is just as corrupt. Iran has an actual civic society. Like, the problem is that Saudi Arabia and Iran are both incredibly corrupt, but Iran has non-corrupt elements to it as well, whereas Saudi Arabia is just the corruption. It's barely even a country. It's like it's a petrostate / like religious tourist destination that has just enough of an upper crust to profit from the exploitation, you know? Iran has like a country. It has a civil society. It has a cultural export that isn't just oil. Iran exists, is the thing. What is their cultural export? Look at the Middle East. Iran is insanely influential. Vaush, please stop. Stop what? Cringe takes. What cringe takes? I think I need more more explanation on the Iranian cultural export. Okay, what I mean when I say that is, you know how Israel is a wealthy and powerful country, and in spite of that, Israel cultural influence stops at its borders and barely even exists within them? Like, Israel may have a ton of money and power and weapons, but Israel doesn't have the ability to peacefully sway its neighbors by way of its desirable way of life. What it represents as a local power, what it stands for as an independent nation. It doesn't have that kind of sway. Like, a good example of this, I feel, would be Mexico can't invade the United States militarily, but the entire southern belt of the United States of America is massively influenced by Mexico. A lot of that is because there are many Mexicans who move up across our border and immigrate, and a lot of that is also because Mexican culture is very robust and rich and desirable. So we import a lot of it deliberately, even where there aren't Mexican immigrants. You can find Mexican food anywhere in the U.S. at varying levels of quality, even if there aren't a bunch of, like, you know, Mexican immigrants there. So, okay, you know how in like Civ games there's like cultural borders that extend outward? Those are real things. Throughout history, oftentimes control of a region has been determined just as much by the cultural influence of a state or a power or a kingdom or a religion. The spread of Islam and Catholicism would be great examples. You know, if you look throughout history, like, it's not always just these are the political borders. It's how well do these ideas spread. And the ideas that Saudi Arabia and Israel represent are disproportionately weak in the region with regard to the virtues and interests of the population. And that's mostly because Saudi Arabia doesn't stand for anything outside of being a petrostate. That's it. Literally. Literally, that's it. Like, is Saudi Arabia on a global scale and regionally is just like they are a tourist trap for Muslims and they are a petrostate. It's the same with most of OPEC, the UAE, Qatar, whatever. They're think of the UAE, think of Dubai. Okay, Dubai has an ungodly amount of money. How much cultural influence do you think Dubai has? Like, imagine, for example, another city that is very wealthy and powerful, like New York. If you could place a New York anywhere in the world, that shit would be like the fucking cultural epicenter. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? New York is like this vibrant, rich, culturally developed city that would be on its own. It would be like a city-state within any other country on earth. It would be like this, like a fucking temple to human civilization. And it is. In the state of New York, the city of New York is so powerful that people don't even really talk about the rest of the state that much. When people say New York, they mean the city, not the state, unless they say New York State. So, same with Tokyo. Yeah, Tokyo is like they're like massive trees that spread out all across the place, like the roots of Tokyo or of Delhi. Or New York, or even Los Angeles, spread deep and wide. Does that make sense? But that's not really the case with Dubai. London, yeah, London as well. That's not really the case with Dubai, because Dubai's wealth and power comes mostly from it being like a playground for the ultra-wealthy, It's funded by slavery. It's built by slavery, funded by the petrodollar, and it sustains itself, barely, by attracting ultra wealthy people to go over there and do like Instagram tours. It's not an authentic local culture. And you know why? Because authentic local culture is made by poor and middle class people, not wealthy people. It's the same with New York. You walk around New York. What is the breathing heart of New York? Sure, there might be wealth everywhere, but the art, the breath, the life in the streets, that's the common man. That's the regular person. But in Dubai, go right now and look at the streets of Dubai. I dare you. Go find a drone video. It's laughable. The city exists to be a playground for the wealthy. You know what poor people in Dubai are? Slaves. They're foreign workers who were brought in. Many of them have had their visas taken, and they build shit for they can't produce culture because they're literally kept in like a separate system. It's apartheid, but by wealth, and ethnicity in a lot of cases. So to that extent, despite its unbelievable wealth, Dubai doesn't have much regional culture. Saudi Arabia is like that, but a country. I am simplifying to an extent, but I really truly mean it. Saudi Arabia has Mecca, but it doesn't even, as much as it would like to be, it's only interested in being the steward of Islam to the extent that it brings in pilgrims, There's no real effort by the House of Saud to make themselves like the actual pious epicenter of Islam. That's why Iran is a much stronger regional Islamic influence. Think about it. Iran is like the epicenter of all of these jihadist groups. Like they despite, the Sunni-Shia conflict and like the regional differences and blah, blah, Iran commands much more regional control, much more in terms of like deference. But that's bad. I would rather Iran have it than Saudi Arabia. Vaush is correct. Iran's cultural influence reaches all the way through Afghanistan and Pakistan. Other Arab countries actually dislike Saudi Arabia. Yeah, because Saudi Arabia is seen as like a petrodollar cuck state to the West. Like no religiously oriented Middle Easterners, Arabs or whatever, think of Saudi Arabia as a sellout. Like they just exist to make money off oil and sell it to the West. They don't give a fuck about their people or about Islam. They built that god-awful like clock tower overlooking the Minecraft cube, the Obsidian cube. And they're right, yes, and they're correct. And like people who are like Arab nationalist don't like the fact that Saudi Arabia is cucked out to the West because they're very like polarized against Western influence in the region. And people who like, local culture, like actual regional Arab culture don't like Saudi Arabia because again, so Saudi Arabia, has made itself in many cases into a kind of semi-secularized like tourist trap. Like Yes, Saudi Arabia is extremely religiously conservative, but a lot of that is just a way of maintaining control. The House of Saud relies on religious police as a way of keeping the population in line. The House of Saud themselves, they don't care. It's performative. It's like an excuse. It's the same way that like Putin relies on the Orthodox Church in Russia to keep control of the population, even though the state of Russia is functionally secular, you know? I understand that I understand that I'm simplifying things a lot, but there are reasons why I think Iran should just be given control of the Middle East in a cultural sense. We're doing an ungodly amount of damage fighting against this, you know? Like, think of all the areas in the region that have been torn apart as a product of us failing to let the local power have their local power, you know? It would be like us constantly waging war with a bunch of like nations adjacent to Nigeria and like being confused why they're all war torn. I guess more war torn than they are now. You know, I don't know. Let's just finish the job in Syria. Oh, well, you know. I was in Saudi Arabia last week, and Vaush is absolutely correct. There's literally no culture in Saudi Arabia. It's literally what happens when a bunch of desert Bedouins become billionaires overnight. Yeah, exactly. Like Saudi Arabia and Dubai are both like the vibe of very tasteless guy wins lottery and then instantly buys like 6 mansions or whatever, you know, as opposed to like an urban area that develops over time because of like a bunch of really complicated history that builds up culturally. You know, it's just a very, very, very different vibe. You know, it's all Trump tier shit, which is why Trump really likes Saudi Arabia and Dubai. So there you go. You know, Iran has an actual civil culture, and while Iran may be controlled by autocratic, theocrats, the Ayatollah, the religious police, I think there's a lot more authenticity to that particular brand of religious authoritarianism than what Saudi Arabia does. Like, I get the feeling from what I've read and heard that Saudi Arabia, literally, like, the idea that the religious shit is just a form of control is, like, well known and almost blatant. Whereas in Iran, there are a lot of legitimate Islamic traditions there that, what if Vegas but religious? Vegas would be another great example. Yeah, Vegas also doesn't have that much regional culture. You might think, oh, but we hear about Vegas all around the world. Yeah, you do, because it's a tourist destination. But Vegas doesn't have that much regional culture to like the area around it. In fact, I bet a lot of you don't know shit about the actual like real city there. What's it called? Like everyone thinks of Vegas Strip. But that, like, the actual settlement there is quite big, and it's just a settlement, you know? Yeah, Paradise. The Las Vegas Strip actually sucks a lot of wealth out of Paradise City, you know? Seriously, like, Google it, you know? A lot of what you'll see of Paradise City, like the actual Paradise City, just looks like this. It's just a nothing nowhere city. You know, it's a bland suburban sprawl that stretches out from the strip. When you think of Las Vegas, you know, you think of the strip. You think of shit like this. But this is just a tiny little square of a large, you know, here, hold on. Paradise City, Nevada, map. Whatever, I feel I've made my point. Look, if we truly want peace in the Middle East, this is what we need to do. We need to get Israel to chill out, be contented with its borders, and don't even look at Iran. Don't even talk to them. We need to deal fairly with Iran, and that means we need to accept the fact that Iran is a regional power. We have to spend so much time and money trying to contest what they get naturally. You ever wondered how their relatively poor country is capable of funding all those terrorist groups in the region? A lot of that is because they don't have to spend the kind of money we do. Their control over the area is a lot more natural. We have to bring over, like, and we're all the way over there, man. For them, like, a bunch of militia groups in the Middle East already hate the West, you know? They just get some, like, Cold War era weapons and they're set. Not really natural power, just power. Then I should say that a lot of their power is cultural, not just militaristic. American power in the Middle East is purely military, 100% military. Every time we step in the Middle East, it is because we have soldiers and tanks and ships and blah-de-blah. whereas Iran enjoys an enormous amount of cultural control just by virtue of it being a large, powerful country with a lot of cultural export. People in the Middle East know about Iran. They've heard about Iran. They know about Iran's shared struggle. They might disagree on the Sunni-Shia line or whatever, the fact they're not Arab or whatever, but like there is a line there. It's better than the West. So they'll take their money, they'll take their guns, and we need to get along with Iran, and we need to deal with them fairly. Right now, again, the main reason we're doing this shit is because we want to like wedge a proxy war against Iran so we can prevent them from building nuclear weapons. Something we can't do unless we invade them. We can't keep relying on Mossad to bomb them or whatever, you know? No, this is deeply materialistic, Jigsaw. How would you reconcile being friendlier to the Iranian government and supporting Iranian people's protests? You can try to like engage fairly with the country while acknowledging that their people need more freedom. It's possible. I mean, we do it with China. Sorry, Vaush, but you're really underestimating the Persian-Arab divide. Oh, okay, yeah, but like, clearly think like who has more sway over the Arab world, Iran or us? Because we can only do it with our wars and proxy governments. Like we're not like in terms of like regional powers, not to mention that we're responsible for a lot of that divide too. Like the Iranian or Persian Arab divide may go back a billion years, but like the current galvanization has definitely been fueled and exacerbated by our involvement and the lines that we've drawn. What we did with Iran, Iraq, Iran has very little sway over the larger Arab world. Saudi has more influence. I disagree. Well, I mean, it depends on what you mean by influence. I think that given the fact that Iran seems to have its hands in so many pies and it can do so effectively while keeping itself stable, it suggests to me that there's a greater potential for collaboration along those lines than there is with Saudi Arabia. You know, like all the Saudis have is money. The Arab cultural hegemon would be Egypt. I don't think Egypt has the cultural sway at the moment. Maybe I'm off on this, but it really feels like Egypt has been doing its own thing for a while. Maybe it would in the future. I think it has potential to in the future. But like right now, it seems like they haven't. You're really underestimating the Sunni-Shia divide. If I stand by my statement that Iran has a lot of legitimate cultural sway in the Arab world, like I think that is a highly defensible statement that most people would agree with. And that a lot of the Western/Israeli/Saudi sway is a direct byproduct of Western meddling that has worsened the situation massively. Egypt used to be the Arab hegemon in the 50s to 70s. Yeah, but that was a different world back then, you know? Sunnis do not like Shias. No, I understand that. But also, Arabs don't like the West, and Saudi Arabia is seen as a like cuck to Western interests. We supply them arms. We do the sanctioning of Yemen alongside them. You know, the petrodollar is international, and you know, Saudi Arabia is a very illegitimate steward of the interests of the Muslim people. You know, also Iranians are not Arab. I know, that's what I'm saying. The Persian Arab Gulf, or not divide. I mean, I'm surprised that it hadn't crumbled internally earlier, Philomath20. What are we even arguing against right now? I feel like people in chat are arguing against positions that I don't hold. That like Iran is good or perfect or whatever. The only thing I'm saying is that if you take a look at like regional influence, like this is how bad we are. We invaded Iraq twice, then spent like 8 years building Iraq back up. And then as soon as we leave Iraq, they just fall into Iranian control. Why? Because Iran is the larger, stronger country in the region. We can fight against that. I mean, we can just keep military bases there and indefinitely hold control over them or whatever. But like, you know, why? You know, and there's your like, you know, Sunni-Shia divide or whatever. Like, how is Iran manifesting that kind of control in spite of these differences? I think a lot of it is just because a lot of people in the Arab world hate us. They hate us. I think genuinely, that's a bigger divide than the Sunni-Shia one. Right now, the big line in the Middle East is perceived Western ally versus like regional force. And Iran is absolutely not a Western ally, not even remotely. But Iraq, well, it was. I mean, they've been falling, right? With Afghanistan, we try to hold influence in Afghanistan. The nanosecond we leave, right back to Islamists. Right, immediately. No time wasted, you know? Saudi Arabia, you know, which is held in contempt by a lot of neighboring regions, except for other OPEC countries, because, you know, they support each other, like monetarily with the petrodollar. Iraq was not under Iranian control when Saddam was there. Iran only took control of Iraq because the regime propped up by the Americans was incredibly weak. Saddam was a regional power strong enough to resist Iranian hegemony. Yeah, but, okay, that's a fair point, yeah, but he was bad. He was far worse than the Iranians. And in the absence of his regional power, like we have galvanized the Middle East to a point where anti-Western sentiment is an incredibly powerful driver. Like, look at all these groups, dude. The Houthis, Hezbollah, to an extent Hamas as well. The Shias in Iraq, Iran, the Taliban in Afghanistan. Who do they hate? Us. They hate us. They hate us so much. Can you blame them? They despise us. And of all of the groups in the Middle East, who is the only group that is power and has been consistent in its opposition to the West? Because it's not Saudi Arabia. The Kurds don't hate us. Yeah, well, I didn't add the Kurds to that group. The Kurds are also relatively powerless compared to a bunch of other groups in the region. You know, obviously Rojava can't stand up to Iran as like a local cultural force. Syria doesn't really fit into this IMO. I didn't add Syria because they're so fucked at the moment that like it's hard for even. The point I was making to you, Vaush, is that even a middling power like Saddam's Iraq is enough to resist Iran's hegemony. Iranian hegemony is not really as powerful and as inevitable as you think. Saddam Hussein died 20 years ago. You know, I feel like we're rooting a lot of our analysis in older ideas of what the Middle East is, you know? Yeah, first of all, Saddam was not middling, but also Saddam was effectively backed by the West during the Iran-Iraq war, and he was backed by the Soviet Union, too. So, like, that was also meddling. There's always been meddling. The modern Iranian government hasn't really been meddled with. This is another testament to its authenticity in the eyes of anti-Western powers in the Middle East. Like, yes, Russia and Iran have ties, but they have ties, you know? They're not like a slave to Russian interests or whatever. That would be Assad. Like that, like Assad is a puppet of Russia to a large extent, or at the very least, a very strong ally that makes you kind of suspect of Assad's intentions, especially since he like purports to be the, you know, like secular power in the Middle East. But Iran is Muslim and autonomous, right? That gives them a lot of legitimacy. Sorry. Wait, hold on. Wait, I don't even know what we're arguing about now. Are we good? Are we fine? Can you talk about the ways in which this is materialistic? Everything that I'm describing right now is material power, like class and regional interests. Culture is also material. That's not ideological. Like cultural influence isn't a non-material force. We're talking about like cultural and sort of like national distinctions which relate to like opposition to the West. The US actually helped Iran's religious groups to power. Yeah, but I mean right now. The one major asset that Iran has is that they're the one largest Shia country. Their proxies are all Shia minorities. Yeah, that gives them a wedge to empower other countries in the region. You haven't even mentioned Egypt. What's up with that? Because Egypt hasn't been throwing its weight around much in Middle Eastern affairs lately. Also, they're like all the way down there, man. They're in fucking... they exist, but at the moment, it seems like they're mostly trying to do like dictator power play shit. Like they're not... Maybe in the future they'll do more power play shit. Like they're so disinterested in flexing power over the Middle East that they're not even trying to allow Palestinian refugees in as a way of like showing good faith to the broader interests of Arab people against Israel. You know, they could like if Egypt did that, they could do a lot more to ingratiate themselves to other Arab countries, but they're not because they're doing their own thing right now. You know, most of their influence die with us. Yeah, it's been a while. Do you think the West should trade with Iran like we do China? Yes, yes. Is Iran it's like we trade with Saudi Arabia. Like Iran is less evil to its own people than Saudi Arabia. We trade with China, which is more dictatorial and more of a threat to US hegemonic interest in the form of the invasion of Taiwan that they keep threatening to do. Yeah, 100%. They're the Spain of the Middle East. What does that mean? No, we need sanctions for the nukes. No, no, no. You don't. Sanctions never work. No. Sanctions. No. We need good trade You can't sanction the nukes. They weren't going to get uranium from the United States. They already have they're building at it now. Sanctioning them will only make them hate us, which they already do. We don't need to sanction them. We need to invade now. Okay, you're just trolling. Holden Bloodfeast has entered the chat. Yeah. Sanctioning North Korea helped, didn't it? Yeah, North Korea is totally doing fine and never developed nuclear power. They aren't going to change because we're nicer to them. They literally did. We had an agreement with them following the Obama administration. We did. It did. That's how diplomacy works. If you think they're not going to change because we're not, like, why even believe in diplomacy? This is like that attitude, like, we don't negotiate with our enemies. Those are the people you do negotiate with. That's the group you're supposed to negotiate with. They violated that agreement? No, they didn't. We broke it. Trump backed out of the agreement. What impact do you think BRICS will have? BRICS is irrelevant. BRICS is like Megacope. It doesn't mean anything. Masagui, I can't stand it when people talk like this. Let me tell everyone how you talk. Vaush, I really don't think you know enough about Iran's internal governance and regime methods for internal control. What do you talk? What do you? It's very presumptuous. I've covered Iran like multiple times through the years I've done this. Why not wonder, what am I talking about? By the way, the reason I said that Saudi Arabia is far more evil than Iran is because Saudi Arabia literally has a like point-by-point government plan to force global reliance on oil in spite of their acknowledgement of climate change, to the point of like appointing ministers and lying to foreign governments, threatening them, and like backing opposition candidates in developing Africa and Southeast Asia so that they continue to be reliant on oil for as long as possible, even though they know it's going to destroy the planet and they don't care. They're threatening the end of the world. Iran does what? They kill a bunch of their dissidents? Yeah, that's bad. I agree. Maybe if we, I don't know, reach out to the Iranian government and try to like introduce some element of Western influence into their government, indicate to their population that they're not completely on their own out there. Remember, the whole line that the Ayatollah uses to promote their like religious tyranny is, only we can protect you from America. You know, the great Satan across the ocean, only we can protect you. And you know, considering the fact that all America is interested in doing in the Middle East is invading countries and appointing like proxy leadership and like threatening Iran and breaking our deals with Iran and shit, maybe they have a point. Maybe the Ayatollah is protecting them from us. The only way we can actually end that cycle and develop like mutual reliance, both culturally and economically, would be for us to deal with them fairly, you know? But we are currently dealing fairly with Saudi Arabia, and that's not making them less evil, because the way in which Saudi Arabia is being evil is because it can trade with us. It's a different environment. Again, Iran isn't just a petrostate, you know? Vaush forgetting they were killing women for uncovered hair a few months ago. Liz following up. First of all, it was more than a few months ago. Second of all, that woman was interrogated and beaten to death by the religious morality police. They were not just executing people on the street. Third of all, I covered that in multiple segments on my stream, so I'm not forgetting it, okay? You're forgetting the details. Fourth of all, what does that have to do with what I just said? Why do you insist on doing this? Why are you arguing? What? I have been given the Ayatollah's blessing. Tie me to a missile and fire me at VGG. Why do you guys insist on doing this half, like this like patronizing, insincere, oh wow, guess Vaush has forgotten about? No, I haven't. I remember everything. Like why? Just disagree. You can just disagree. Just say, hey, but what about X? Like, why? It's not like I don't see chat. You're not just talking to other chatters. I look at chat. God almighty. Vaush, normalizing relations would definitely not cause less internal repression. It might lead to regional stability, but it wouldn't help the Iranian population. I disagree. When did we all give up on diplomacy? When did that become a thing? I missed this. I missed this boat. How would you know? Don't you think that like there might be a relationship between the global polarization, or at least the Western polarization of Iran, and them needing to rely on like a strongman Islamist government that protects their people, quote unquote, like promises to protect their people, like much in the same way that Netanyahu's regime has been empowered by, or at least the authoritarian wings within Israel have been empowered by the presence and violence of Hamas. So too is Iran empowered in its authoritarian elements, at least, by our meddling in the region. Like, what's wrong? Like, are you neocons? You all just want to sanction or invade or something? I don't want to invade Iran. First of all, we'd lose. Second of all, like, the death. You're wrong if you think the Iranian government will ever stop their war on women. Okay, literally just You are unironically doing the exact same shit that neocons did to Arabs back during the Iraq War. You're doing the exact same, like, these people will never. Your essentialization is disgusting to me. Nothing is will ever or is ever, okay? Governments change, people change, ideas change, values change. Everything changes, nothing stays the same. Right now, you're guaranteeing things stay the same because you're promoting the ideology that led Iran to the point that it is at right now. The idea of, like, yeah, they're evil, so, like, whatever. Yeah, that attitude worked great with Cuba. It worked great with North Korea. It worked great with Kazakhstan. It worked great with Iran. How many times must we make this mistake over and over again? And by the way, working great in Afghanistan, you know, where the only break to Taliban rule that it enjoyed was when we fucking invaded them the moment we leave, the Taliban comes back up. Maybe it's time we normalize relations with them too. Oh, but they're bad. Yeah, being bad doesn't mean you don't negotiate with them. That's the point of negotiating with you don't need to negotiate with your allies. They're your allies. You negotiate with your enemies, or at the very least, countries you're not in good terms with. What else is the point of engaging? If you do not make room for diplomacy, you leave room only for war or constant regional instability. We fought with Vietnam and now we're besties. It's possible, chat. Yeah, Vietnam after the Vietnam War. Like we've engaged in good relations with Vietnam, and now they're both quite a bit more powerful and more liberal, and we're on good terms with them. Like there's value in diplomacy. Would you apply this logic to Russia too? Yes. The problem right now is that, like, Russia's government is literally currently warring with Ukraine, which means that, like, the environment there is definitely distinct. But yes, like, absolutely. How much did our sanctions work after Crimea? Did they work? Did we stop the invasion? We sanctioned them after 2014. Did they work? Can I email you to have a talk on this? No. Vaush, I agree we should negotiate with Iran as the lesser evil, but having relations with authoritarian countries doesn't seem to make them less authoritarian. See China and Russia. For one, Russia doesn't count. We didn't. We did horribly to Russia. The shock doctrine, or the shock therapy, we influenced them in a way that led to the most negative outcomes. We could have engaged way more with Putin back when he initially became leader. You know, we made so many mistakes with Russia that it's, like, laughable how badly up. And with regards to China, I would argue the opposite. I would say that our engagement with them is the only reason they haven't become, like, a hard regional power, to the exclusion of the rest of the world. Like, I would say that, you know, given the material circumstances with China, the fact that we engage in diplomacy and economic, like, collaboration with them has kept them. Because I think otherwise, man, if Nixon hadn't opened up talks with China, if we hadn't been getting along with China, like, following the end of the Cold War and trying to, like, engage with them, I'm pretty sure that they would have just, like, turned into another Russia. But they haven't. They haven't. They may be an authoritarian government, but there is a very, very, very strong westernizing trend. I shouldn't say westernizing, perhaps I should say liberalizing trend in China. As their country grows wealthier and more middle class, they become more reliant on the boons of their economic engagement with the West. And in addition, they become more global. The wealthier a population is, the more likely it is that they might travel the world. Do you have any idea how many wealthy people's children go to America for education? Do you think China would want to wage war in a country where fully, like, 2 million people on the West Coast are first generation Chinese immigrants who are all at, like, UCLA or Berkeley or whatever? You know, like, that engagement allows. Do you have any idea how much Iran could soften if Iranians and Americans could easily travel between each other's countries? I'm not saying it would be easy or happen overnight. I'm just saying that, like, economic engagement, cultural exchange, the people of Iran don't hate America that much. Like, the people of Iran are weirdly disproportionately okay with America compared to a lot of other Middle Eastern countries. Maybe because of shit involving, like, bitterness that the Islamists won after after the revolution. You know, I think we can. Incorrect. The shock therapy was entirely Russia's doing it on its own. The Russians were incredibly arrogant. What are you guys doing? What do you mean? No? Wait, a fleet of Western business interests, politicians, and venture capitalists went over to the former Soviet Union and facilitated and like involved. They were like ripe for the taking. Like the Russian oligarchs were arrogant, but they were the ones who got all the wealth. We overlooked a lot of those. What do you mean? Why are there neocons in chat? What have I done? We can't negotiate with Iran. They are scary sand people. I am smart American. The US literally saved Russia from starvation in the 90s. We did provide aid after the end of the Cold War and the dissolution of the Soviet Union, but we also did a lot of stuff to their economies that did a lot of harm. Yes, I know a lot of Chinese international students are fucking fascists and will stay that way after studying in America. I know that, but they're fascists in America. Better that than fascists who have never left the borders of their country, right? It's kind of like how we nuked Japan, but we didn't nuke Tokyo because one guy in the war cabinet had like his honeymoon there or something. It's the more people in your country have traveled, the more places around the world you've been to, that your people have been to, the harder it is to destroy those places, you know? There are just too many ties. There are too many bonds together. There are too many things link these countries. Kyoto, not Tokyo. Thank you, thank you. They have many of the same letters. Okay, but the same can be said about Iran, Vaush, so why would we think it would go any better? What do you mean? Because Russia had a collapse that we then preyed on. We're not praying for Iran's collapse. Like, the Soviet Union falling is a very unique, like, to it thing. Like, that's a very, like, specific thing, you know? With Iran, I don't want their government to collapse, you know? I want continued exposure to international westernization to give more credence to secular and counter-government forces within Iran to the point where they eventually give up and call for elections, you know? Wouldn't that be cool? Like, imagine if the Iranian people had enough cultural and economic exchange, you know, the idea of some kind of like call to revolution, or sorry, even to elections, like grows louder and louder to a point where it's like, you know, the government starts to feel the pressure, starts sweating a little bit. Iran doesn't have total control over its people, not even close. The protests indicate that. That literally happened before we couped Iran. Well, yeah, but I don't want to coup Iran this time. We Iranians want our government to collapse. You want your leadership to collapse. You don't want to happen to Iran what happened to the Soviet Union. Like, the Soviet Union didn't just have a change in leadership. The Soviet Union fucking collapsed, right? You want, the Iranians want the leadership in their government to, you want democratic leadership. At the very least, you don't want what you currently have, right? But that you don't want like a complete economic collapse, you know? Vaush, I heavily disagree with your take on China. The state exercises control even abroad. The trend clearly indicates a move towards more authoritarianism control. You didn't listen to what I said. I said I think that China would be worse were it not for our engagement with them. Here's a question. Do you think China would get more or less fascist if we closed all trade with them and closed our borders to their people? Think, like, for 2 seconds. Oh, obviously that would make it worse. Obviously that would make everything worse. Okay, so our continued engagement is positive then. There we go. I don't know. I feel like we're doing some neocon bits right now. I don't know. I just, if you don't want like good engagement with Iran, what do you want? A war? I think some chatters are think you're arguing Iran is currently better than Saudi Arabia. They are 100%, absolutely 100%, unquestionably. Iran is 1,000 times better. Iran has a repressive theocratic government. Saudi Arabia has a government master plan to end the world. Saudi Arabia is like unimaginably, incomparably evil. It's unbelievable. Like it's like all the petrostate business with all of the political capital necessary to, like, you know, sway elections in your favor. We need sanctions to do Iran nuclear deals. No. Sanctions are the opposite of what you want to do if you want to do a deal with the country. Vaush, again, not arguing against that point, but the supporting arguments are plain wrong in China's case. For what? What would be your answer to Iran bullying its neighbors? Invasions or sanctions? Or what do you mean by bullying? Like what specific bullying are we referring to? What should we do with Syria? I don't know. Iran agreed to the nuclear deal because it meant sanctions be lifted. Yeah, and then we broke that deal. Do you think the 2014 sanctions against Russia were the wrong move then? I mean, clearly they didn't do anything. They didn't help. I don't know. I mean, all it really seems to have done is kind of like force Russia into being reliant entirely on resource extraction as a petrostate. Like, you know, a lack of equal economic engagement means their economy shifted to a point where it was capable of sustaining itself through a war effort because all it needs is like domestic oil production and, you know, shipping. It doesn't seem to have worked. It's my problem. And natural gas, yeah. Cooing the government, suppression to their people by sending militias, etc. Yeah, but like what specifically? Because right now, Iran is waging a proxy war against the West and against Israel, you know? I can't really blame them that much for doing that, considering we did the exact same thing in the form of Israel and, you know, invading Iraq and Afghanistan and supporting Saudi Arabia's attacks on Yemen, you know? Like, it feels like this is a war that we have to back off of. Chat doesn't understand that Russia has irredentist ambitions which are non-negotiable in the current international norms. Iran doesn't have that kind of issue besides nuclear weapons, which they were willing to negotiate on. Yeah, a lot of the issue with Russia is ultimately a nuclear one. Iran doesn't have nukes yet, and we still have the potential to fix that, keep that from happening. Russia already has them, which means they have to be handled differently. But clearly, like, the sanctions didn't work, right? I mean, yeah, I don't know. The really fucked up thing, man, is that the West was willing to sanction Russia, but not to bolster Ukraine economically. We're so retarded, dude. Like, it's obvious that Putin is a dictatorial strongman who has aims to, like, expand the borders of Russia as a way of compensating for his lacking, like, domestic presence, because he's insecure about EU control and, like, co-opting by the West. And then we were like, that seems bad. What if we sanctioned Russia rather than giving money to Ukraine? Why do we not invest in Ukraine and make it like a bulwark? Like, what? Like, we're so stupid, dude. You know why the Azov battalion existed and got incorporated into the Ukrainian military? Because Ukraine was so weak and so poor when Russia annexed Crimea that they didn't even really have a military. The only thing they could do to fight against the separatists in the Donbass was to employ militias like the Azov battalion. We let them rot. We let Ukraine rot. Why? Because of dumb neocons like you guys. Because when you see bad things happening in the world, you think, sanction, invade. No, the only way to positively express political influence, did we not do the Cold War enough? Which areas of the world remained loyal to us and which ended up becoming bloodbaths for the remaining century, you know? There are areas we invaded and cooed, and there are areas that we invested in. And frankly, even our investment was heavily conditional and very, very tinged by Western, like, imperialistic interests, you know, like what happened in Italy and Greece and stuff. But nonetheless, we know this doesn't work, you know? So we have Ukraine's like, oh, we'll sanction Russia. Okay, well, what if we did the hard part? What if we invested in Ukraine? What if we invested in Iran? We could. It's not like if we invest in Iran, they're going to like, you know, like they're going to invade Ukraine from the other angle or whatever. Or like, what would they invade? You know, what if we got along with them? What if we, okay. You want to be anti-Russia? Ooh, I get you, you non-credible defense posters. You want to be anti-Russia. Wouldn't it be convenient if Russia wasn't able to wage proxy wars against Western interests by relying on the support they get from countries like Syria and Iran? Wouldn't it be cool if we used our ungodly wealth to do something in the Middle East that wasn't just invading, cooing, putting up proxy governments? What if we, I don't know, did something in the Middle East that made it so that Iran didn't hate us? Like, I don't know, hypothetically, the unfreezing of sanctioned assets in exchange for the right to allow international inspectors to keep an eye on their nuclear development program as, I don't know, like a first step towards detente. Or what about in Syria? I don't actually know how to fix Syria. I'm not even going to comment on that. Or what about, I don't know, maybe the fact that the combined sanctions that we in Saudi Arabia led in Yemen led to the death of so many civilians and also to the growth of the Houthis, which are now attacking like maritime trade in the Red Sea. Maybe like, I don't know, maybe it was a bad idea to kill all those people in Yemen from the civil war that we like intervened in and helped Saudi Arabia with the weapons that we gave them and all the civilians died. Hold on. Civilian deaths in Yemen. 1/3 of a million by the end of 2021 through direct and indirect causes. You know, a lot of that was caused by the starvation. Let me see. Starvation, most of which were due to hunger and lack of health care, which, you know, we and the Saudis together like exacerbated severely because we didn't engage. And now the Houthis are stronger than ever. You know, I'm not saying there aren't complications there, and I'm not saying that the situation in Yemen was as simple as us just choosing to kill a bunch of people for funsies. I'm just saying, like, I don't know, man. Maybe the, like, dominant strategy that we've used to try to, like, even from, like, a Western hegemonic perspective, we're not doing this to our own benefit. This hurts. It costs us a lot of money, and it doesn't win us allies. We're clearly not doing very well. Maybe we should try opening up a little bit. I don't know. I don't know. Mr. Vaush, I think war is bad. I agree. When would you say sanctions are acceptable to employ? Find me a single example of them doing what we wanted them to do. Did they help in Venezuela? Did they help in North Korea? Did they help in Russia? Did they help in Iran? Maybe in some specific situations with the nuclear deal. The nuclear deal involved the removal of the sanctions. Maybe we should help build up Kurdistan to protect the marginalized Kurds. Yeah, I agree. And that would involve telling Turkey to off. Yeah. I agree, Arskakarva, but I don't think sanctions would have helped because look, we've now super double mega sanctioned Russia to the point where it's difficult for them to even do international commerce. And what has it done? Nothing. Russia's keeping the war going because Russia is so poor and Russia is so filled with oil and natural gas that even with no external investment, except for a few countries that we can't control, they're capable of like maintaining a war economy. It stalled out their war though. To an extent? I mean, wouldn't it have been better to, like, build up Ukraine? I get where you're coming from, but you give Iran's government way too much credit. I agree invasions and sanctions are very stupid. The point of appeasing Iran... I'm not saying I've never said appeasing. I've said necessary investment and exchange. You think diplomacy is appeasement. I disagree. What concession have I said we should give them? Not one. You read that. I haven't said that. Weren't Abrahamic Accords example of good diplomatic solutions that U.S. negotiated with Saudis and other countries that aren't as insane as Iran? Iran literally wants the destruction of Israel. I really don't think wanting the destruction of Israel is an insane perspective from Iran. Israel literally sends Mossad agents to kill their nuclear scientists. Like, Israel threatens war with Iran. I don't think that Iran's opposition to Israel is irrational in any way. Israel has very much earned the ire that it gets from the Middle East. There's a lot of anti-Semitism on top of that, but even if every single Arab and Persian was like a perfectly like anti-Semitic, like totally tolerant, you know, they would still hate Israel. But if Russia was not poor, their war action may have been... Yeah, but they weren't... No, you're doing the thing. You can't just say, this country's evil, so if we make it so they don't have money, less evil will happen. It's not how it works. Countries, when they're desperate and impoverished, are more likely to lash out and invade. Don't you realize that? Look at what Venezuela's doing. They're in deep shit, and they're like, yeah, dude, and, you know, let's annex 2/3 of our neighboring country. Making a country more desperate does not make them less likely to do bad things. North Korea is desperate and impoverished. It threatened. There was a conference just the other day where Kim was like, "Yeah, we still want to nuke South Korea and Japan and America." Like, it doesn't work. It never works. It never has worked. It will never work. It's impossible. It's an outdated political theory. It doesn't function. Mutual investment is the only way we've ever won allies. You know, it's not like Ottoman Empire days anymore. It's not just all annexing and moving borders and shit. In a lot of cases, yes, Enbiota, to an extent. We embargoed Japan with oil in World War II. Yeah, because they were currently using it to commit a war in the Pacific. I'm fine with that. Would Iran come to the table voluntarily? They did with the Obama administration. Yeah, am I cognizant, but this is hardly the ideal outcome. The sanctions helped us make Iran do a nuclear deal. Okay. If you think... Okay, just... The only way to do diplomacy is to steal money from a country and threaten to not give it back until after they agree. What if we, I don't know, tried to develop a good relationship with them? Why, like, do you think there's anything we might have done over the past couple of decades to make Iran suspicious of us? Maybe we could, I don't know, okay, how about this, huh? How about incorporate it into foreign aid, okay? Develop an international program where choice allies and potential allies of the United States have agricultural or architectural products that are produced by foreign teams of U.S. workers who go there and facilitate the project so they can have, like, their version of the Statue of Liberty, you know? Not something that big and grandiose, but a nice fountain square with like an American flag on it, your gift from your allies across the sea, the United States. We used to do shit like that all the time, by the way. We still do to an extent. We have a fountain in Palestine for all the good it did them. You know, like anything, like any engagement, talk, be anything, you know, something, anything. There are so many things countries can do to get along with each other. Jesus, steal money, Vaush, come on, you're poisoning the well. That's what we did with our sanctions in Iran. We unfroze their assets. We had their assets and we froze them. They were their assets that we froze. And nobody likes it when the US does major investment, call it meddling. That's not true. That depends on the kind of investment. I don't see how sanctions affect how the US helped Ukraine in their buildup. We did indeed help the Ukraine military with training and infrastructure. I'm not talking about helping the Ukrainian military. I'm talking about investing in Ukraine. You can take a look, if you want, man, at the level of investment and support that Ukraine got following the annexation of Crimea. Ridiculous. This is their GDP per capita, by the way. You might notice that it's like half of Belarus's. Look at that. Up to here, and then 2008, that happened everywhere. And then over here, annexation of Crimea, collapsed, only recently got back to that point. Yeah, we helped them a lot, you know? Yeah, we had NATO commanders over there training with their inept and underdeveloped military, but that's not the kind of investment I'm really talking about. Yeah, we really helped Ukraine out. Why are there unironic warhawks in our chat? I don't understand. Does anyone here thought that I thought war was like a good solution to international issues? What leverage would we have towards a nuclear deal with Iran without the sanctions? Investment. Investment. Money. An ungodly amount of money. More money than Iran could ever dream of having. We can do anything we want. So basically what China does in Africa? Well, yeah, African country. Yeah, another example of how investment is a better strategy than being retarded and not doing anything. Yeah, the Belt and Road Initiative is ingratiating dozens of countries to China. Soft colonial power and investment, building bridges and schools and hospitals, meaning these countries now have leaders who came to power off of working with the Chinese envoys who bring that wealth and investment. You know? I don't know. It's a good way to do stuff. I don't know. There's literally no reason for the US to not throw around unlimited money. We're the global debtor. Yeah, it is genuinely wild that we are the reserve currency, that every economic transaction that happens internationally is done based on the relationship of that currency's worth compared to our dollar that only our government prints, and we use it for what? Private trade. We could be 10 times the Belt and Road Initiative. We could be the world, we could be the center of economic development in the world, but we don't. We talk about how we overinvest in other countries when we spend 0.5% of our GDP on foreign aid. It's pathetic, you know? It's pathetic. We could do anything. We could rebuild the world. But we don't. We don't care. Who cares? No one cares. Whatever. Are you saying the IMF and the World Bank are the solution? Not even remotely. What makes you think a theocratic state like Iran would care for US money? Every state cares about US money. They have to. Isn't that what makes Saudi Arabia less impactful in the US compared to Iran? Yeah, the difference is that first of all, we don't use our economic investment to leverage anything in Saudi Arabia. We don't do anything to second guess them or double check them or improve their behavior because we don't give a we just trade with Saudi Arabia because we don't give a fuck about trading with monsters. Iran is not like the global epicenter of the petrodollar. You know, they're not like the petrostate. So the investment that went towards them wouldn't be in like promoting fossil fuels or whatever. Also, we can be critical with our investment. I'm not saying we just give them something for nothing. I'm saying we trade and do diplomacy with them. When did these become dirty words? Ironically, this mindset is what Iran hates about America. The fact that we have the money to potentially reshape the world for the better is a fact. The problem is, like, America, we're just this shiftless, bloated mass. We're a dying, we're a festering corpse. America is a great corpse upon which 1,000 well-fed crustaceans are feasting eternally, okay? We have all this money and all this power. There's so much material and mass, but no will or drive. We just sit there and we rot. We're nothing. China is nowhere near as wealthy or as powerful as us, and in spite of that, they did the Belt and Road Initiative, and they're doing more year by year to build international goodwill than we have in ages. What was the last big international project we did? Invaded Iraq and Afghanistan? Great, good for us. Oh, we helped the Kurds out for a little bit, but we're too big, much of fucking to tell the Turkish to stop attacking them. So like, okay, whatever. What are we doing even? Nothing. We do nothing. We're dead already, okay? China is doing something. They're not doing great. There's a lot of problems with what they do, but they're doing something, and they do it with a lot less money than we have. I guess we aided Ukraine, but then we aided Israel, kind of canceling that out. If we had been smart from the start, we never would have had to aid Ukraine. Invading is all we know how to do. We tried nothing else. We're all out of ideas. Yeah. You need to recognize diplomacy in Iran would need to include Israel, the Palestinians, the Saudis, and possibly the Arab League. Well, yeah, we already do diplomacy with the Saudis and the Arab League, and with Israel. It's just the Palestinians and Iran we don't do diplomacy with, because Palestine isn't even a state of its own, of course. Not really. Let's do an American Belt and Road. I would love that. Yes, I would love that. That's an incredibly complicated subject, Drostrossi, but from my limited understanding of the subject, my impression is that EU constantly and continuously up massively when it came to dealing with Russia. Do you think Iran will recognize Israel? Iran has no need to recognize Israel for the time being. We're talking about opening diplomacy, not moving mountains here. Iran has every right to hate Israel. Vaush, this is correct. The EU had giga rose-tinted glasses because when they were dealing with Russia for decades, because they were just neoliberals. Their idea of investment in Russia was just neoliberalism. What if we had favorable business relations with your oligarchs? Why did this end up being such a subject? For what am I being persecuted? I have been nailed to the cross for what? For my belief in diplomacy? Why?